Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. Also check me out on Twitch as Floyd Mason.
Hello, welcome back, Spooks fans. We are back for another Goosebumps review, and we are on to book number 14, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. Pretty cool cover here. We'll get into it more at the end, but pretty nice shot out near the bog, which we'll get into. They go near the bog a lot in this book. Pretty cool colors. That wolf is looking pretty bad. Really, pretty good cover, I'd say. We'll see total feeling at the end, but also got the re-released one. Also pretty cool. Quite like this one as well. I actually think I like this one a bit more, which we'll get into the reason at the end. But some of the spoiler, good cover. I think that's pretty clear. A pretty cool one, and getting into that kind of typical, that classic, movie monster kind of one. Like we did the Mummy already. I don't know if there's been really one that's kind of Frankenstein-like-ish. I also don't think there's been a vampire-ish one yet. I guess there's kind of the Invisible Man, in a sense, with Let's Get Invisible, but it's more mirror people. I don't think it's the same. So, kind of the second of those classic movie monsters, kind of having the werewolf. But this book, with a huge stretch by Stein, it starts off with a family moving. I think that was just his go-to. He just did it one book ago, and Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, of family moving to a new area. This one is about a boy, Grady, who's the main character, and his family moves to a swamp in Florida. So he's kind of the main character. His sister Emily is there as well, moves with them, and then the parents, they're both scientists. The dad has moved there to study. They have some special deer that he's taking to see if they can survive in the swamp, and all that. So I'm pretty sure they bring the deer with them, and it's a study to see if they could survive in this different habitat. So their house kind of backs up onto a swamp, and he's just got a big pen there that the deer live in. So, kind of starts out, they're new to the area. Grady's bored, and he wants his sister Emily to go out with him on a walk in the woods and kind of just explore the area. He's pretty bored. They just moved there. There's not that many houses there. It's kind of like a little bit out of town. So I think you can kind of see the houses, but your neighbor's not up on you like a subdivision. So they go for a walk. They kind of stop at a pond for a bit, and they keep going a little bit further, and they find another one, but it's a weird color. And Emily kind of shouts out that it's quicksand, and Grady feels somebody push him from behind, and he's falling in, and it's Emily. Stein back to his typical. I feel like this book got back to it a bit more than some of the other ones again, of really having the chapter cliffhangers, when they're like nothing, just like little shocks where, oh, she pushes him, and then the next chapter she grabs him and she giggles and she's like, oh, it's not quicksand, it's a bog. Which is just kind of, it's like a thicker pond, like usually like moss grows on and stuff. Like you don't really want to go into it. It'd be pretty, a lot of them still pretty gross. So they kind of, he's upset about it. So they keep walking, and they're walking for a while, and they realize that they are lost. So they just keep wandering around, and it's chapter 2 of them just like, oh, what are we going to do? It's getting dark. Like, why don't you have your compass? And they wander around until they find the bog again. And then they're kind of like, okay, we know how we got to the bog. It is a thing too. I think it starts talking about how it gets a bit dark, but I don't know if it's just, dark in the swamp or whatnot. 'Cause I think when they get out, it's light again, but whatever. But they find their way back to the bog. And kind of not too far from it, they find a small shack. So they go, and they decide to go and see what's going on with it. They get close, a man jumps out at them, and they get terrified, and they run away. He chased them a bit. I think at one point, Grady falls over a root, and another classic cliffhanger of oh, he's got me, and then his sister's like, it's a root, you you dummy. You're fine. Get up. And then so from here, I think they find the pond next, and then they get home. So pretty close. So they get out, and like Dad tells him that he's heard about the man in town. He's always just lived out in the swamp and fends for himself, and he's heard that he's harmless. And the kids are like, oh, like he chased us, and Dad's just like, it must have been a misunderstanding. Like he's harmless. Don't bother him, but don't leave him alone. So after this, he meets Will, which is one of two friends that he makes in this new area. I don't know if they ever mentioned kind of like the town name, but the swamp is called, obviously by the title, Fever Swamp. And then so when he meets Will, he tells him, I live a few homes down there, and points to his house, and he tells him why it's called Fever Swamp. And basically, there's just kind of a story from like 100 years ago or so, and anyone who went into the swamp came down with a fever, and so they call it Fever Swamp. Not really a super interesting kind of name for it, but they make plans to hang out later. And then Will is actually a little sick. Grady's a little sick. And they're kind of like, I must have the fever. I got the fever from Fever Swamp. But he lies down. It's not a big deal. He's fine by the next morning. That night he hears the howls for the first time. So one thing with this book is reading this one back to back with Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. I found a lot of similarities in them. And the main part was a lot of the book was the kid going to bed and hearing noises in the night. The last one being him hearing the piano playing, and this one is the howls. So there's going to be a lot of chapter ends. I'm not going to say it every time, but a lot of times it just ends a chapter with him going to bed and hearing the howls. He thinks he hears a noise then at the door. So he hears the howls, it kind of is keeping him up, and then he hears like scratching at the door. So he gets up, he's kind of scared. They have a little jump scare because Emily's out there too. She also hears it. And Grady opens the door, and there's nothing there. So they're just kind of freaked out. No one's there. Dad also wakes up, and they tell him what's going on. And he's like, oh, maybe you're just hearing things like the howl. It's probably just an animal in the swamp. Like, don't worry about it. Could be a wolf. It's fine. And they all go to bed. Next morning, when Grady opens the door, and he's immediately jumped by a large dog. So they figure, like, this is what must have been scratching last night. Like, maybe he's drawn to the house or whatever. Like, maybe, the people that lived there before used to look after him, whatever. Reasoning. And Grady wants to keep it. This dog is described as huge. Like, it's just a naturally big dog. Looks more like a wolf. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen, like, you think wolves are kind of small, but if you ever see like a real wolf next to a dog, like, wolves are huge. So this dog is huge. So the parents are like kind of against it, but Emily actually stands up for once and like, just let him keep the dog. Just moved here. It's good to have. And like, honestly, I would say as a parent, like, I'd want, if my kid's going to be wandering around a swamp, having a dog with them, just kind of protect him if there's any other animals out there, and especially this huge dog. And so they kind of tentatively let him keep him, and he names the dog Wolf, which won't get confusing later at all when we're talking about this book. But yeah, so he's got a big dog named Wolf. So Will then comes over, introducing the dog, and the three of them go into the swamp. So they're kind of wandering around. Wolf at one point, I can't remember if he runs off or he just stays behind, but they're like, whatever, just met this dog, whatever. And the two of them keep going on, and they hear something, so they hide. Again, he thinks it's maybe the swamp hermit again, that he's going to chase them again, and they jump out, and it's Wolf. So a cheap little jump scare by Stein again, just having him in. But again, they're just kind of playing up the swamp hermit a lot. That he's out here, that they're scared about him. They then see the hermit again right after this, and Wolf is very on edge around him. So Wolf kind of stands between them, and he's kind of doing a low growl and just a protective stance. So, Grady kind of notes that. He's like, oh, like, Wolf has been out here. Like, he knows this guy. Like, he's got a problem with him. I need to stay with this guy, right? Like, obviously, if Wolf doesn't like him, then there's something wrong with this guy. So, again, they're just really playing up kind of this hermit and this weird guy who lives out in the thing, out in the swamp. So, they decide that's enough for today. They're heading back, and on the way they find a heron that's been ripped apart. So this isn't like a human kind of pulled at it or shot it. It looks like something ripped it apart. Could have been, could have been a wolf or something like that. And they kind of talk about it, but they both think it's a monster. They think it has to be a monster out here. I can't remember actually at this point if they start talking about werewolves or if that's when the next friend comes in. But I think they talk about how they think it's a monster or like a big animal, and like maybe that's what they're hearing howling in the night. So again, that night, there's a lot of sound, and something's in the house, and then they're kind of freaking out, and all the family comes out, and he's brought Wolf inside to sleep tonight, and Wolf is just destroying the house, trying to get outside. So, opens the door, and Wolf runs out and off into the night. And at this point, Dad's like, okay, like, we're still tentative on Wolf, but from now on, he is an outside dog. Which I think a dog that big, that's used to being outside, and that destroyed your house the first night you kept it inside, it's like, yeah, that's an outside dog. I think that's fine. That's where it was from. It's going to be impossible to train. That's totally fine. So, runs off, and then he hears the howling again in the night, and just is like kind of wondering about what's going on with Wolf. Oh yeah, so when he hears the howls too, he goes outside and he finds a rabbit that's just been torn apart. So this is the second animal that he's found. Like, clearly something is hunting things around here, and I think at this point the parents think it's Wolf, that he's probably doing it, and that maybe Grady shouldn't have him around. Emily also starts to sour on Wolf, because this and just I think destroying the house she's not too big on. So at this point the family really isn't too big on Wolf and him being in the house. So next day he's hanging with Will again. Will comes over and he tells him what happened, and then Will also tells him that a neighbor up the street named Mr. Warner has disappeared. So apparently I think he went out hunting and just hasn't come back, and no one knows. And the boy's like, oh, the monster got him, and the monster's probably the swamp hermit, so the hermit got him. And right then is when the other friend, Cassie, shows up, and she starts talking, and she's, I think, the first one that starts mentioning a werewolf. She comes over and she's like, oh, the werewolf got him. And so that's when they start sitting around, and they just kind of have this whole talk about like the werewolf and what it does, and just like the lore of it, and why she believes it's a werewolf. And they kind of bicker about it. Will's more like, no, it's a monster, a wolf, but it's not a werewolf. And Grady kind of doesn't know what to think. Like, he's pretty new to the area, doesn't know these kids at all. But Casey's convinced. She tells them all about it. So three of them decide to go in a swamp. And again, they see the hermit, and they're kind of hiding from him. And Casey says a little too loudly that he's a werewolf, and he jumps at them. Like, he sees them, and he jumps at them. He's like, I am the werewolf, and starts yelling and kind of howling a bit. So they get freaked out. They run off again. And he is chasing them, and Grady falls. He slips in some mud. He can't get out, and the hermit catches up to him and just kind of starts laughing. He's like, I'm just kidding. I'm not a werewolf. Like, I heard you. I'm just joking around. And at that point, Wolf appears again and just kind of again is growling at a bit. And the hermit's kind of like, be careful with that dog. Be wary. So it's kind of like this odd scene. You're seeing that the swamp hermit could have, he gets to him before Wolf's there, so he probably could have done something to him, but he seemed pretty genuine in the fact that he's just laughing it off, and just seems like an otter guy. I think they see him carrying a turkey too, and they're convinced that maybe he stole it from Mr. Warner, because that's what Mr. Warner was supposedly hunting. But Grady doesn't know what to make of it, and him and Wolf kind of go back. As they're heading back, then Grady's bit by a snake, and there's this whole little subplot. And this is definitely Stein getting to a bit of the filler of his book, where Grady's like, oh my god, is it poisonous? So he walks back, like Wolf kind of walks back with him. When he gets to the edge of the swamp, Casey and Will are there, and they're like, oh, like what happened? We thought he got you. He's like, oh, I got bit by a snake. And So they run off to get his dad. Dad kind of brings out the thing, and then it's just, oh, it's probably a green snake, not poisonous, like wrapped it ever tight, extra tight to be safe. And like by the night he's already saying like, oh, it doesn't hurt that much. So I mean, definitely in some of these books, even for as short as they are, there is some padding. I think as a kid it didn't really bother me, and when you're a kid, you're wondering what's going to happen, and some of these twists do lead to something. But Stein does use a lot of just pointless it's almost like he wrote 20 chapters and they're like, oh, we need 22. So he goes back and adds a chapter about the snake bite, and he adds a chapter about, like a dream in some of them, or, just adds like howls to the end of it to squeeze out a couple extra pages. So it's a pretty pointless thing. Like the two friends come over again, and he's kind of like, oh, my leg's fine. And again, they just kind of argue about the wolf. And the werewolf and what it is, and like obviously it's the swamp hermit, or no, it doesn't exist. And it doesn't really get anywhere. They kind of all accuse each other of it, and like they're just stupid kid things. I think like Casey's like, well, you're a werewolf, and he's like, well, you're a vampire, and just back and forth, stupid stuff. Again, a little bit of a filler one, and I don't think we see Cassie after this scene as well. So a lot of connection to the last book, I feel, where you kind of bring in this character who's in 2 scenes, and it's just to kind of bring in plot points from outside. So in the last one, it's just to kind of be like, oh, the Shriek School, and, how, like, people don't come back. And this one, like, Cassie's just there to bring up the fact that werewolves exist. It seems like it's her only plot point. She doesn't do much else. So again, here's something again at night. The howls, something going on, and he goes outside, and he finds that one of the pen has been ripped into, and one of the deers has been killed. So this is a big one, because this is the thing, like, the other animals, like, yeah, they've been torn apart, but like maybe a vicious person could do it. There's no way like a person ripped into the pen like this. So it's an animal, and at this point, the parents, especially the dad, are convinced that it's Wolf. So they're pretty upset. They're like, we have to get rid of Wolf. Wolf is becoming dangerous. He's clearly killing animals. And now he's destroyed a deer, which is important to the dad's work. Grady doesn't believe it, of course. But, they're like, oh, we'll talk about it in the morning. But the dad's like, yeah, I'm going to take Wolf to the pound. He's dangerous. He could hurt you at some point. I don't think the mom really says much, but Emily agrees. And Wolf actually shows up, and he's like, oh, he's harmless. See? And he puts his arm into Wolf's mouth, and Wolf just kind of lets it sit there, and he's like, oh, like he could never hurt anyone. But the dad wants to take him to the pound, and so Grady just yells at Wolf to run, like, run, get out of here. And Wolf, confused for a second, runs off, and the dad's pretty upset. He's like, he's gonna come back, like, come back to eat. We've been feeding him, so he's gonna come back to eat. Like, that was really dumb, Grady. Like, I'm gonna take him to the pound. Wolf luckily doesn't come back. Grady's super happy about that. Like, he misses him. He loves Wolf, but he's happy that his dad can't get to him. So that night, however, when he's going to sleep, he sees Wolf at the edge of the swamp and kind of wanders in, and he wants to go follow him. There's talks around this point too, that Grady starts bringing up that it's not Wolf, it's a werewolf that's doing it, and it's not Wolf. And the dad does mention that there's going to be 2 more full moons, and it does line up with the full moon type thing, but doesn't go much more into that. But he sees Wolf, follows Wolf into the woods, and he runs into Will. And, Will is also kind of like, oh, I heard howls, like, I thought I saw something out here, so I came too. Grady's kind of relieved. He's like, okay, my friend's here, like, again, he's kind of a little unsure about Wolf, like, parents are swaying him a bit, and he is nervous about the swamp hermit, so he's glad to have Will there as well. And they kind of go wandering, and it's dark, and they get separated for a bit, and all of a sudden something jumps out and attacks Grady, and it is a werewolf. So this is where we get to the point, and like some of the books, they kind of like allude to the things and whatnot, but like this one there is actually a werewolf, and he realizes that it is Will who is the werewolf. So I mean, it's one of those ones that to me it seemed pretty obvious early on. I think part of the issue with some of these shorter stories, that he writes is there's not enough characters to really do it. So when I was reading this, it's kind of like I didn't believe for a second that it was wolf. It just doesn't make sense for a dog to turn into a werewolf. So it's kind of like that thing, and I'm pretty sure I had the same feeling as a kid. I'm like, it's either a really dumb twist and it is just wolf as a dog killing people and there is no werewolf. It's the swamp hermit, but that seems too obvious and it just doesn't feel right, or it was Will. So even as a kid, I was pretty sure, and we'll get into a little, I think, spoiler as well, but pretty sure it was Will. And so Will jumps him and he bites him in the shoulder, and Gray's in a lot of trouble, and then Wolf comes out. And Wolf fights him, and it doesn't really say what happens. It kind of insinuates, like that he let out, like, you hear Will let out like a defeated cry or something. So, it might imply that Wolf kills him, or that he just runs off. I'm more likely to believe the latter. Grady gets home, he tells his parents that he was attacked, tells them that Will is a werewolf. Dad doesn't really believe it, but he wants to go talk to Will. I'm sure it's that thing like, oh, this kid is scaring my son, I'm going to go talk to his parents. And he goes to Will's house, and there's nobody there. It's completely vacant. Nobody lives there. Will had been lying. So it's pretty obvious. And, like, Dad doesn't really say it, but it's kind of like, okay, like, that's weird. But he seems to be gone. And, it seems like it's fine, and Will's not there. And at the very end of the book, they reveal that Grady is now a werewolf, which shouldn't come as a shock. He was bit by a werewolf. That's kind of the point. And also, to me, it's kind of the reasoning behind, well, Will can't be dead because, by all the myths, you kill, the head werewolf that bit you was killed, you're healed. So I choose to believe that Will is still alive based on that fact. And it ends just kind of with Grady and Wolf going out and doing, going hunting in the woods together. So yeah, that's kind of the book. A decent tale on the whole wolf item. This is actually a book I feel could have deserved a sequel. Where Grady, maybe Grady, it's about him and like how he's a wolf and like kind of dealing with it, and maybe, how they're getting him, although I don't know how that would fit his story. Or maybe Grady gets tired of being a wolf, and so he tries to hunt down and kind of has to fight Will. But I mean, again, to do that, they might have to, unless they come up with some, you have to do like pour this stuff, and then that'll stop the wolf, and that'll save you type thing. But you can't use it on yourself thing. They'd have to kill Will, which, again, he's clearly killed people in his stories before already. But I think by this point he was going for spooks, but he was definitely less violent. I mean, the bite is pretty violent. It's a little gory. But like, things don't tend to happen to the good characters as much. I don't fully recall. We're getting to the books that I don't remember reading. Like this one I remember, but not super well. Like, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's that Will kid when I started reading it, and I was right, but I didn't really remember the in and outs of the story. I just kind of remember the basic plot and the ending. And I forgot that he became a werewolf. So, yeah, so that's kind of the book. Again, I feel like it has a lot of... I feel like this is the point where Stein was just... He started churning them out, because he did kind of early, but he had some ideas. And I think at this point, we start to get groups of books that feel very similar. Like, he kind of has ideas for the book. I think I read once before that I think he would come up with the names was a big thing, and then he'd kind of write a story. I think was part of his style. But I think you can see that it's like, okay, he's writing a story, but he just uses kind of the same beats, right? Where it's like new person moves somewhere. There's a place of interest, piano versus the swamp. And, hears things in the night, and that kind of gets him. And, you're kind of supposed to be afraid of this one thing, either the ghost or wolf. And then it turns out that the person he trusted, the janitor and his friend Will, are actually the bad guy. And that kind of creepy thing saves him in the end. The only way they would have been the same is if it was like the hermit showed up again and saved him. But I got these backwards on here. So I'm gonna give this book an A. I think it's a low A. I think it's almost a B, but I kind of looked at some of my B's, and I think it's better than them. So I put it up here. What helps this book is I find the atmosphere of the swamp fantastic. When they get lost in the swamp, it's creepy. Grady's a pretty decent character. Like, he's just a boy interested in exploring. The family is all believable and well written. I think it's hurt a bit by the fact that it's really similar to the last book. So when you read them pretty close together, like I did, you really are kind of like, it's the same story almost, just a bit different. And the ending of it being Will, I think was too predictable, because you're reading this book, there's a werewolf. Like, it's one of those things where, like, it could have been a twist and just whatever, but especially with the cover, which we'll get to in a second, you're pretty convinced there's a werewolf, so you're going down that route. But the atmosphere is fantastic. Like, the creepy swamp, kind of like, I like the howling more in this one of the scary thing versus the piano music. I kind of wish the piano story had changed a little bit. Again, I give them both A's. I think they're both good. But just the different aspects of it kind of work differently. The fact that, again, it has a throwaway character in Cassie who's just there and gone, is kind of whatever. But decent story. I like in the end how he gets to become a werewolf, and it's just him and Wolf going out to explore. Like, as a kid, that's fun. Like, that's a fun ending. It's something that a lot of kids kind of think about, is like, I think if a lot of kids could pick to be a monster, it's the werewolf. That's kind of the cool one. I don't think anyone wanted, like, maybe kids want to be a vampire, but I doubt much want it to be a mummy or a Frankenstein or the creature of the Black Lagoon or anything like that. I think werewolf's your number one. Now, as for the cover, I'm giving it an S. I love this cover. The coloring of the letters is great in this one. The green with kind of the purplish one. Like, the swamp looks creepy. It looks really dark. The moon there. The wolf looks great. The bog is so green. The only thing that almost pushed this down, and it's part of the story I think I've been kind of hinting at, is the clothes. I hate that the clothes are here. Because to me, when I saw this as a kid, I picked it up, I immediately knew that Will was the werewolf. That was because the clothes are here and they look like it's a kid's cap. And again, it might be referring to Grady at the end. This might be Grady. But as a kid reading it, I was like, well, it's Will. Like, it's a kid. It's a kid's clothes. It's a kid, a kid is the wolf. And so that kind of ruined it for me. But I don't want it to take away from the rest of the cover. I would have just left that. And it is why I like this one more, is this one, this wolf could be anybody, right? Like, this could be the swamp hermit. This could be, like, who knows? Maybe they threw a thing out and the dad got bit the first night there and he's a werewolf now, right? Like, this could be anybody. So I do like this cover slightly better, just for that. But I think if they got rid of these clothes, I would like this one more. But still Ness, still a great cover, very creepy. The werewolf looks, the wolf in it looks amazing. And a big fan of it. So that's going to do it for this one. It's been a bit since I've read some. I read that one a while ago, just been busy. So I actually can't remember what book is up next. But I will try to get to that one soon. Again, starting to get a bit more time, trying to keep up with this a bit. So we'll hopefully get to that one soon. I gotta pick it up here a bit. I'm only 14 books in, but again, they're pretty fast to read. But just, I make notes on everything because my memory's awful. I have to remember a lot of stuff for work and things like that, and I play a lot of video games, things that push out of my brain so quick. So I gotta read it. I don't like to make the notes while I'm reading because it just slows me down, takes me out of the book too much. I like to, I then kind of have to write it up and mark what I'm going to give them. But yeah, that's going to do it. Anyone who's hanging out this long, I really appreciate you. I hope you're enjoying. I hope, Maybe you go out and read a couple of these yourself. If you forget them, again, they're kids' books. They're not as exciting as they were when the kid, but to me, they're a fantastic blast from the past. I'm getting excited because I am getting to the books that I don't remember, which is what I really wanted to do. I bought this whole set because I became a dad, and I do want to read them when he's a little older to my son, and maybe he'll get my collection one day, or I'll get him his own if he's really into them, or very careless with books. But they're fun little reads. They're quick little reads. And I suggest if you like, not too scary of horror, but want a quick one, go and grab them.
Thanks for watching. Please click to check out my other videos, like and subscribe, and come by Twitch under Floyd Mason to join my live streams.